taught you about sex? Who provided healthy teaching surrounding intimacy? What were those healthy examples of love and romance that you were exposed to in your upbringing? Most adults in the United States of America, when asked those very same questions, realize that the teaching that they have received surrounding sex and intimacy and even relationships were completely unhealthy and have promoted to the struggles and challenges that they experience in their relationships as adults. A sexless marriage is defined by the frequency or lack thereof of sex between a husband and a wife. Specifically, a couple that has sex less than 10 times a year is considered to be in a sexless marriage. 20% of marriages in the United States of America are considered sexless. When therapists right here in the US are surveyed, they say about 50% of the couples that they treat are in sexless marriages. And guess what? That also includes kingdom marriages. People who have accepted Christ as Lord and Savior understand the importance of living in faith. They too are struggling. The divorce rates also include kingdom marriages, and that is why I am here today. My name is Schellie Fanfan, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist practicing out of the state of Florida. And I've had the privilege of doing so for almost 3 decades. I work with married couples and exclusively dating partnerships and helping them to overcome their attachment challenges and their attachment injury. I also get to function as an ordained minister, helping kingdom believers to truly learn the secret sauce, the psychological principles surrounding living authentically in their smiles. Today, we are going to be talking about intimacy and so much more. Whether or not you are in a marriage right now that you consider healthy, whether you are in a marriage that you consider completely unhealthy, whether you are not married and you endeavor to be in a healthy marriage one day, this presentation is for you. We again are talking about intimacy and more. All of you within the sound of my voice, you'll have the opportunity to differentiate intimacy from sexual gratification. You will have a greater understanding of the psychology behind maximizing bonding and attachment to one's spouse. We're going to be talking about the different areas of improvement that may exist for you in 3 main zones of intimacy. We're going to talk about skills that promote sexual connectedness and safety. We're going to be talking about the importance, the power of being honest about unspoken needs and expectations. And we're going to talk about the Word of God and how this applies to this entire conversation. I want to warn each and every one of you. Some of us have not established a sense of comfort when it comes to the discussion surrounding intimacy and sexuality. Understand that feelings are not facts. You may feel like what is being talked about is wrong. It may feel uncomfortable because of your past relationship with the topic. But I just want you to know that feelings are not necessarily facts. You may hear something today that may cause you to feel a little uncomfortable. And guess what? It is okay because there is no growth without discomfort. I'm going to call things by their names. I am going to call breasts, breasts, nipples, nipples, penises, penises, and vaginas, vaginas, because we are breaking bondage. We are breaking chains. That is what the purpose of today's webinar, of today's discussion. And so know that I am going to be extremely candid. It may feel uncomfortable. It does not make it wrong. Let's start with talking about the functions of sex, including sex being for pleasure, for emotional decompression, for exercise, for recreation, for procreation. It helps to maximize effective communication. It's an opportunity to channel emotions. It is a way of establishing intimacy and connectivity with your spouse. It's for preservation. That's how we continue to promote the human species on this side of heaven. And it's also for fulfillment. There are three A's that I want to quickly talk about, and these are different functions of sex that may not always be healthy, right? And that is when we use sex for attention. That means that we are voided of attention somewhere in our marriages, and we use sex to attain attention, or we use sex to avoid the issues and the problems that are in our marriages. And so we sweep those problems under the rug, we avoid them, and then we use sex to overcompensate for those voids. Also, we have attain. This is when someone uses sex in order to attain something tangible from their spouse. This includes abstract ideas or abstract principles such as power and control, right? So the three A's are three different functions of sex or three different uses of sex that may not always be healthy. Again, to gain attention, to use it as a form of avoidance, or to use sex to get something that you want, a reward that is tangible, and it can also include abstract ideas such as power and control. We have to ensure that in our marriages, we are not weaponizing sex either. Because I am mad at you, I'm going to withhold sex, or because I'm not happy with you, I will be aggressive in the way that I sexually connect with my spouse. We have to ensure that we are not weaponizing sex. It makes it extremely unhealthy, and it really prevents great intimacy from happening. Let's take a look at this beautiful potted plant, right? And so we have the pot and we have soil in the pot, and then we have this beautiful plant. So let us assume that the plant represents great sex and the pot and the soil represents intimacy. What would happen if we take that plant outside of that pot? Drum roll, please. What would happen is the plant would eventually die without the soil in that pot. And so think about it this way: great sex does not necessarily promote great intimacy, but maximize and great intimacy will almost always promote great sex. And so let us talk about the relationship between our thoughts, emotions, and how we choose. Our thoughts charge our emotions, just like how we charge our cell phones at night. Our thoughts charge our emotions, and our emotions influence how we choose. Our emotions influence how we behave. Our emotions influence how we show up in this world. Again, we have these thoughts that charge our emotions, and our emotions influence how we show up in this world. And so when we are thinking about how we show up in our relationships, how we show up in our marriages, we have to be able to understand how we think. When you want to change how you show up in your marriages, it's important that you are able to be aware of how you think, because in order to change how you show up, you have to change how you think. If you want to change how you feel, you have to be able to change how you think. This is why the Bible instructs us to take every thought captive. God knew how we were wired as human beings. If you can manage your thoughts and elevate the quality of your thoughts, you can manage and elevate the quality of your life. When we are talking about intimacy, it's important that each and every one of you identify the thoughts that are not productive or helpful when it comes to your intimate connections with your spouse. Why is he touching on me? Why is she touching on me? I don't feel like doing this. These are all thoughts that you have the power to reframe. You get to connect intimately with your spouse. It is a blessing. Let us catch those thoughts that are not helpful and reframe them. Place a positive spin on them and understand that you may not believe those positive spins. You may not believe those positive declarations that align with the word of God. You may not believe it. But guess what? Faith doesn't come by belief. Faith comes by hearing. What you need to do is reframe those thoughts consistently, and it will become a fixed belief system if you do that consistently over time. Today, we're going to be talking about intimacy zones, starting from cold to hot. Most of the time, when people want to connect and get some intimacy coaching or some attachment coaching, they want to go straight to the hot zone. They want to know how they can reach a point of climax, increase the frequency, duration, and passion in their sexual connection with their spouses. But guess what? We cannot get to the hot. We cannot go to the hot. We cannot talk about the hot unless we maximize our functioning in the cold zone, in the warm zone, and then we can benefit from the hot zone. And when we are talking about the cold zone, we start this conversation today talking about roles and responsibilities. And I know I've heard couples say, well, we don't have fixed roles or fixed responsibilities. We kind of just flow. And if that works for you, then it works for you. My team and I, what we stress and emphasize is the importance of having a clear understanding of what roles and responsibilities are so you can have a clear understanding of expectations. Expectations or unmet expectations are the root of most conflict. So when we have clear roles and clear responsibilities, we are operating at higher levels of conflict prevention. In the cold zone, it's important that we have open communication with our spouses, right? Again, remember, I know that most people want to talk about the hot zone, but we can't talk about those zones until we have those foundational principles, those foundational mechanisms, those foundational practices that cause a marriage to be strong and sound. Open communication. How well or how do you do as a husband or as a wife to make communication safe for your spouse or even for yourself? Open communication. We're talking about open, honest, and upfront. What are we going to do here? Because I want to make sure that you're truly listening and engaging. We're going to do something called a traffic light assessment. And that is when you give yourself a red, yellow, or green as we talk about these different concepts. So, as a challenge to yourself or as a follow up action after this training, after this discussion, you can go back to your reds and work on making them yellow or green. So, red light is when you realize that you are at a dead stop when it comes to a certain skill or practice or mindset. Yellow is, I recognize this as area of growth for me and I'm slowly making progress. And green is, I got this. I do this very, very well. I could write a book. I got a doctoral degree when it comes to this skill set. Because what you're going to be encouraged to do is after this training to go back to your notes, look at those reds and strategically plan on how to make it yellow and green. Look at those yellows. How are we going to make them green? Okay. So everybody within the sound of my voice, engage in your traffic light assessment. So here we're in the cold zone. What do we have to do in the cold zone? There has to be mutual support of one another. How are you communicating that you are unconditionally present for your spouse? Routines and schedules that prioritize the relationship is key. What I always say is your calendar and your bank account will almost always expose what you worship. And so it's important to have routines that you are prioritizing consistently over time that gives you the opportunity to refuel, recalibrate, energize your marriages. There needs to be a culture of laughter. Studies show that couples that prioritize laughter, that are intentional about laughing, have higher levels of satisfaction. Consistent exploration of new. So many couples just don't give themselves the opportunity to experience new experiences, new food, new locations, new vacation spots, new. Your brain is designed to need new experiences to continue to duplicate and multiply and grow in brain cells, right? And so if your brain cells are not multiplying, they are dying. What are you doing that's new? What's the last new language you learned, new instrument that you learned to play? What new adventures have you and your spouse experienced together? It matters. Conversations of care is when we're not talking about the kids, we're not talking about bills, we're just talking about our emotions. We're talking about how we feel. Do we feel fulfilled? Do we feel like we are in purpose? Really using each other for therapeutic support. Quality time. Most couples mistaken sharing time and space for quality time. Quality time is when there are three forms of contact happening at once. That's eye contact, verbal contact, and skin contact. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, right? Because it may sound good, but what does that look like? We're going to talk about that in just a few slides. It's important that you are working your purpose, because when you feel as a couple that love is no longer enough for whatever reason, understand that the purpose for your marriage, the reason why God put you together, how he combined your strengths with your spouse's weaknesses and vice versa, that God strategically put those skills, abilities, and talents together, your yin to that yang together in order to answer a world problem. There is a purpose assigned to your life, and there is a purpose assigned to your marriage. So again, when love does not feel like it's enough, purpose will forever be. It's important that you maximize your skills surrounding conflict management. You can have a great marriage, or you can have a high performing marriage. Let me say that again. You can have a great marriage, or you can have a high performing marriage. And those individuals who are in high performing marriages, it is because they have maximized their skill sets when it comes to communication and conflict management. Again, in the coal zone, there has to be fair needs, fair standards, fair expectations. What about those terms of endearment? There's something that our bodies do when we are called pupush, baby, my love, my lord, my king, my queen. You may think that it doesn't matter. We've been married for way too long for that. No, it does matter. Pursuit of self-development, it matters, because your marriage will never supersede the level of your own personal development. What books are you reading? What conferences are you going to? How are you valuing personal development in your marriages, in the culture of your home? It's important that you are engaging in self-care. We're talking about the coal zone, guys. Mental health, hygiene maintenance. How are you taking care of your emotions? Your emotional health, it matters. Why does it matter? Because there are three situations that will almost always expose how well you are or how well you are not. How you parent, how you show up in love and romance, and how you show up in crisis. Those are the three situations that will almost always expose how well you are or how well you are not. How you parent, how you love, and how you show up in crisis. So what you do to maximize your emotional health matters. Physical health matters. The maintenance of routines, they matter. Sex intelligent routines. You may not want to spend time at family's home or stay the night at a family's home when you're on vacation. You may need to go ahead and invest in that hotel room because you understand that you need some of that time, that intimate time with your spouse. What are those sexually intelligent routines that you do to ensure that you are prioritizing intimacy and sexual connection with your spouse? Grooming and hygiene matters. Why does grooming and hygiene matter? You wonder why she's saying no? You wonder why he's avoiding you? It is important that we continue to keep up with our looks, our beauty, our self-care, our physical hygiene. It's important in the cold zone that you have, as a part of your marriage, as your part of your marriage culture, the principle of sharing with one another, showing true appreciation, not just saying thank you. You can just say thank you, right? Let's say you go to a restaurant, your husband or your spouse holds the door open for you. You can say, thank you, spouse, for holding the door, or you may just say, thank you. Here, we're here for a party of two, right? Now, appreciation is when you are not only saying thank you, but you're saying thank you specifically for a behavior that you are acknowledging, and you're connecting that back to an emotion. So again, instead of just saying, thank you, babe, you're saying, thank you for holding the door for me. Every time you do that, it causes me to feel like a king. It makes me feel like a queen. True appreciation. What do you do to show admiration? What do you do to acknowledge the efforts of your spouse? It matters. We call that the 3 A's. How do you show admiration, acknowledgement, and appreciation? Care in marriages is when you know, understand, and prioritize the needs of your spouse, and you do so consistently over time. We're still talking about the cold zone. Self-care. Self-care can mean so many different things. It's important that you are very clear about what you do to promote your physical health, mental health, emotional health, how you are addressing your spiritual health, your intellectual health, your environmental health, your social health, your financial health. What do you do to provide care for that? We're talking about the cold zone. There is no success in the hot zone without true success in the cold zone. And so, how are you guys doing with giving yourselves those reds, those yellows, and those greens? Now we're going to transition into the warm zone. In the warm zone, this is when you and your spouse are intentional about engaging in mental and muscle relaxation. Sometimes we're trying to get right to the hot zone, right to sex, without having those warming behaviors that help us to transition from being a boss, or being a manager, or working full time, or even those transitions from being a parent to now being fully present for your spouse. It's important that there's minimal environmental stimulation. I've had couples say, well, we decompress by watching the news. I don't know if watching the news these days are very decompressing. So it is important that you ensure that the environment is not taking or increasing the demand. That's what it is. We want to make sure the environment is not increasing the demand on your time and your energy. We need minimal environmental stimulation when we are in the warm zone. Kissing happens in the warm zone. Many couples say, oh, we don't kiss anymore. It matters. Talking about your desires can be something that happens in the warm zone. That open communication can be foreplay in and of itself. And understand that the warm zone doesn't necessarily mean that this is how we get to sex. It just means that this is how we warm and prepare ourselves for that connection. Delaying gratification is a great practice right here in the warm zone. Sometimes we think, okay, we're naked cuddling, that means penetration. Not only is there premature ejaculation, there's premature penetration. What is the rush? Let's slow down. Dating happens in the warm zone. Researching together your fantasies, your desires, some of those things that you may want to try with your spouse, some considerations, taking the time during the day to send those kind of sexually charged messages. That preparation for sexual connection could happen over a day, maybe even 2 days. That's all warm zone behaviors. Sending each other pictures. Now, obviously, when you have great boundaries with your phone and your kids are not going in and taking a look, that may be an option for you. Again, these are best practices. It doesn't necessarily mean that works for you or aligns with your culture, but these are best practices for the warm zone. Flirting with one another. This all happens in the warm zone. Washing each other's hair. Now we talked about those 3 forms of contact happening at once. What were they? What were those 3 forms of contact happening at once? right? In the quality space where we're not just sharing time and space, but we're really, really connecting in a really great way. That is eye contact, verbal contact, and skin contact happening at once. Washing each other's hair, bathing with one another, placing lotion on each other's body, massaging one another. You can have a sexual favor jar. You put the little favors that you want, and when you win a competition, or if it's your turn to pick, you can go into that jar. E for exploration, taking the time to explore each other's bodies and those erogenous zones that may not have yet been discovered. Talking cards for intimacy is another great way of engaging in some warm zone behaviors. Naked cuddling, feeding one another, and just learn to slow down. You could take a quick tap kiss. Slow that tap kiss down. Make sure that you're making some form of skin contact on that slow down kiss, and change the dynamics surrounding that kiss. Now in the hot zone, some people are okay with the first glass. I see it to my left. Some people are okay with the middle glass. Some people are okay with that third glass that is almost full. Just understand that God desires for us to be in overflow in so many different areas of our lives. There are many, many, many couples, especially women, that talk about the difficulties that they have with experiencing orgasm. Some women don't even know the difference between orgasm and climax. So, for the purpose of this conversation, just know that orgasm happens when you are in the height of your relaxation and sexual gratification, right? And the thing that it's important to know is that you can have multiple orgasms, and you can have different types of orgasms, like a clitoral orgasm, an internal orgasm. You can have a full body orgasmic experience. Climax is when you hit the very, 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 very end of that. Of the cycle of pleasure. This is when you tap out, right? And most of the time, orgasm and climax is used interchangeably. But for the purpose of this conversation, just to create some more understanding of that, orgasm can happen. You can experience that over and over again. There are different types of orgasm. Climax is that climactic experience when you have reached the total end of your sexual gratification experience. Now, it is important when we are talking about the hot zone that couples are aware of what the other party enjoys when it comes to your five senses. So, what does your spouse like to see? What does your spouse like to hear? How does your spouse like to be touched? What are some scents or tastes, right, that your spouse may enjoy that would maximize the probability of having a successful sexual connection? And then smell. Is it something fruity? I work with a couple where the wife had all types of lotion. She had pineapple, she had apple cinnamon, she had so many different lotions, and all her husband wanted was to smell her natural scent. And so it's important to have these candid conversations so you can be responsive to your spouse's desires, specifically as it relates to the things that are sensory stimulating to your spouse. Understand that we have so many different areas on our body that can be considered erogenous zones. And so we have a challenge here. You can really maximize sexual gratification when you are focusing on making connection with those erogenous zones to increase the overall sexual experience. Some things that promote great sexual connection, how aroused a person is, how long it has been since last orgasm, how much lubrication there is, emotional and mental connection to one another, the type of sexual positions used, the type of environment that a person is in. Continuous stimulation is another action and focus that really helps with increasing the probability of maximizing sexual gratification. Of course, the strategies that you use, I want to go back to that first bullet, how aroused a person is. Understand that it takes women about 30 more minutes on average, 30 more minutes than it takes a man to be fully aroused. So keep that in mind. Some of the things that prevent great sexual connection: stress, performance anxiety, relationship problems, past trauma or abuse, negative sexual attitudes, sexual inexperience, sexual guilt, inadequate setting, medications, diabetes, high blood pressure, faking orgasm. If you're gonna fake pleasure, you're never gonna give yourself the opportunity to truly explore those blockages and set yourselves free. Some more things that promote sexual connection: stress management, exploring and discovering what is arousing, experimenting with different sexual positions, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, talking with your partner about those desires, stimulating erogenous zones during sex, not ignoring those erogenous zones that have been discovered, engaging in foreplay, delaying orgasm, using lubrication when needed, seeking medical attention for issues, addressing emotional barriers via therapy. Sometimes we have to get healed from that trauma so that we could be sexually present in our marriages. It's important to take to learn to master breathing during sexual connections, understanding the difference between sexual enhancements and sexual replacements. I don't coach about sexual replacements. I do help couples find safe enhancements for their marriage and truly determine the culture of their bedroom. What's the culture of your bedroom? What are those parameters? What are those boundaries? How can we find those safe enhancements? It's important to engage in healthy goal setting with your spouse, to constantly be open to establishing goals, working toward those goals, crushing those goals, and then setting new goals. Listen, just this past January, I had the privilege of hosting a couples only intimacy retreat. And during that time, the couples that were present, they experienced great breakthrough in the area of intimacy and sexual connectedness. Understand that God gives us this beautiful thing called marriage, an amazing collaboration, the first collaboration ever created, the first business and love partnership ever created was marriage. And so give your marriage the opportunity to heal, to enhance, to develop by getting the coaching that you may need. Even if you don't feel like you need it, know that being preventive matters. Being preventive is key. Get the coaching and get the support before the problems form, before those issues surface. You can connect with me at www.teachmehowtoheal.com to find out more about the coaching opportunities that we provide individuals who are ready to address their intimacy goals with their spouses. Again, that's www.teachmehowtoheal.com. And all you have to say is that you were a part of the Faith and Mental Health Summit in order to get a free consultation. Again, that's www.teachmehowtoheal.com. And I'm going to leave you with this. 1 Corinthians 7, verses 3 to 5. Let the husband render to his wife her marital due, and likewise the wife also to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by agreement for a season, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, lest Satan tempt you because of your lack of self-control. This passage emphasizes the mutual responsibilities and the need to avoid depriving one another of intimacy. Set yourself free. Give yourself the only gift that you can give, and that's the gift of healing. Get the support that you need today. Kingdom marriages need it. We are a peculiar people, set apart and set apart for God's glory. So go ahead and give yourself the opportunity to experience God's abundance and prosperity, and that includes your experience in your marriage as well. God bless you.